the idea is we need to have these two characters, these two sensibilities, the engineer and the jazz musician, in harmony with each other.
Joe Bill is one of the most experienced teacher and performer in improv. He is the co-founder of Chicago's Annoyance Theater and half of the duo BASSPROV. He has toured the world for decades, inspiring audience and improvisers everywhere. Joe talks about the jazz brain and the engineer brain, Kieth Johstone and their clothes, and to play absurdity with truth. He also talks about the importance of feeling secure and safe, to have changeable opinions and recreational, hobbyist and professional way of playing. Here is episode 116 with Joe Bill on jazz and engineering. So we are here at Improv in Sweden.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, and I took 3 workshops with you now.
How were my workshops?
They were very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Podcast, thank you. Good night, everybody.
But for me, since I'm running this podcast, it's also, and for the people, the Swedish people mainly also that missed it, I think we can maybe go through some, like the main ideas of them.
Sure.
Would be great. Like, can you describe again, like you are the psychologist, improv teacher?
Yeah. So I started studying neuroscience for myself, basically to try to learn. I'm from a family that has a lot of, I guess we say, non-neurotypical brains. And so I've always kind of been interested in how the brain works, and the things that I learned in just studying basic neuroscience led me into it led me to the curiosity about what is happening in our brain when we're in our head. So a lot of improvisers, when I moved to Chicago in 1985, one of my questions in my first year or two there was like, how do I get out of my head? And nobody could answer. Some would say, don't be in your fucking head. And some would say, why don't you try stand up? And so I thought, well, maybe there's something going on where if I understand what the brain is doing when I'm in my head, then that can shed some light on either how to relax out of that or how to avoid getting in your head in the first place. And so I guess the one neuroscience piece, I'm too lazy to get an actual degree, but I am writing a book, and I'm challenging or asking neuroscientists to tell me more about a part of our brain called dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And there is a neuroscientist named Dr. Charles Lim at the University of Chicago who studies the neuroscience of flow in freestyle rappers. And he talks about a couple different parts of the brain, but then he highlights this in one of his TED Talks. And I went, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I did some research on that, and like read some papers. And so as I was trying to get my head around this, I figured out, oh, it's best if I can come up with a metaphor for what that paralysis is when we're in our head, what the negative self-judgment is when we're in our head. And this is right around the time, I'm going to say around between 2005, 2010, where neuroscience advanced beyond the point where we can no longer really talk about left brain, right brain. Now people are talking about inner brain and outer brain and our amygdala and the complexity of the brain. And so I thought, well, if left brain, right brain was good enough for 40 or 50 years, this idea of part of our brain is an engineer and part of our brain is a jazz musician, and what is the neuroscience around that would just support that metaphor? And I went down a rabbit hole looking at how does our brain work when I looked at Dr. Lim and like when we're in flow, what. And then I just said, oh, I'm an improv teacher. I don't need to talk about the brain. It's just better if I have a metaphor. So in all of my improv teaching, and in a way, this is why I'm writing the book, so I don't have to talk about it anymore. I let improvisers know in each of our brains we have an engineer and a jazz musician. I explain some of the characteristics of each. And so as we go through lessons, whether it's as character, whether it's in scene, or like today, we explored sort of a broader idea of different approaches to long form, whether it's narrative or whether it's herald. The idea is we need to have these two characters, these two sensibilities, the engineer and the jazz musician, in harmony with each other. And I like the metaphor because almost every improviser immediately has an idea for themselves what that metaphor means for them. And to me, that's the most important part. And then I can put improvisers in exercises where they can feel their jazz musician fully present, where they can feel their engineer working through problems or trying to figure out what needs to be done. And then some exercises where they can feel their brain moving from one state to the other state. So that's kind of, that's like the history plus the overview of why I use this as an approach and why I approach improvisation from a psychological perspective, because I think every improviser who's ever started improvising has found themselves in their head at one point.
Yeah. Can you say more about the characteristics of the engineer versus the jazz musician?
Sure. So the engineer is the engineering department is where we generate words. We choose words from. The engineer department is concerned with being correct, with doing things right. Our ego lives there. There is an audio library of all the voices of everyone we've ever disappointed in our life that exists there. And the head librarian we call our inner critic. So that is also a metaphor for negative self-judgment, and also the vastness of a library of negative effect or trauma in our brain is a close enough metaphor for the neural pathways that lead us into fixation and loops. And the engineer is a part of our brain that sees us as alone. It sees us as alone together. Its baseline emotional state is anxiety and fear. And practically speaking, that's mostly because it's connected to the prefrontal cortex, the decision-making executive function part of our brain, that helps it make choices that keep us safe, that help us be correct and be right. And then, the danger of that is there's other neural pathways that have us fixate on safety, that have us fixate on being right, that has us fixate on being perfectionistic, of not being satisfied until we have, all the data available before we can make a move. And the jazz department, I really only describe as it's the part of our brain that knows that we're all connected. It's the part of our brain that knows what the collective music is in which we stand, that is noting the collective dance and the movement of our bodies, our spatial relationship. It recognizes how we are already in harmony. But it also knows that while all at once is a manifestation of the connection, of the connectedness that we already have, it knows that the engineer part of our brain is the HR department. So it will not let us manifest our connectedness in an improv scene, in an improv format, in a duo, in whatever, until the engineer feels safe. Yes. So this also works in metaphor relative to neuroscience, in that when we encounter each other, there are certain brain functions. At first, our brains react well to visions and images of people that we're familiar with, that we know. Our amygdala stays relaxed. That's the part of our brain. One part of the amygdala is our fight or flight mechanism. It activates when we feel threatened or we feel unsafe. And so when we are in a familiar situation, the amygdala is quieted down. We don't have fight or flight. Then the engineer brain just wants to gather more data, some of which is observable and some of which is not quite observable to the engineer, but rather that it can access through the jazz department, that like, oh, we are in harmony. We both sing. We're both from the same place. We both have the same accent. We both like the same food. And so once the engineer collects that data that says, okay, we're not going to be in conflict or resistance to each other, but rather there's already an agreement, there's already a harmony, there's already an acceptance here based on that data. It relaxes the control of the jazz musician so that we can just have a few beers and laugh and sing and do whatever together. Or in improvisation, we go through repetitions and practice sessions, I suppose, so we can build that familiarity so that we can relax the engineer part of the brain, and then get on with doing whatever improv we're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I get it totally. So familiarity from the engineer or the HR,
yeah,
like it's very the safety nest. We recognize each other, we know each other, or you feel safe. But also, if I interpret this correctly, that because what I was thinking, it's hard to practice the jazz part. And the skills for me, it sounds like that belongs to the HR part, to the engineer. The skill set, which makes also the engineer relax and be more comfortable and relaxing off the control, because they know the format Harold, because they have practiced it a lot, or they have read about it, listened to it, or learned it. Mm-hmm. It feels hard to learn. Well, it's the measurement. It's the engineer in my brain that works now.
Sure.
Only.
Yeah, me too.
Right?
Me too.
And the listeners probably as well. Like, to Tom, this is a very engineering podcast in that sense.
Sure. And I mean, our species is alive because our engineer brain runs things.
So you could say that you are born everyone is born jazz musician and they learn to be an engineer. Could you say that?
I think everyone is born with the capacity for both.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And so one might say we're born with a certain capacity for reason, critical reasoning. We're also born with a capacity for intuition.
Yeah.
And I think I feel safe enough in saying they're putting those labels on what the blank slate of a baby is, because it's actually not a blank slate. I mean, of
course,
a baby is delivered into the world with, the hardware is already there, and then it just has to get programmed through experience.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then as the baby grows, it develops interests. It's interesting in babies, like their recognition of pattern. Like one of my, I'm really great with like 2-year-old to 5-year-old kids, where I'll play like the hachoo game. Like I pretend like I don't want to sneeze, and then I do a big build, and baby's like, because they know that the build of a sneeze is going to come because they biologically experience that. And I give them the signals like, no, I'm not going to sneeze. And finally, I'll build up, chew. And then I put my hands on my head with my fingers behind my ears. And then I flip the hat off my head as I sneeze. And 99 out of 100 children will laugh their ass off. And for me, I've chosen to believe that's their first improv lesson. So there's something about that pattern recognition, and then the recognition of heightening energy where they haven't seen my hat fly off at the first time, but then I have the big sneeze, and then visually they see a hat fly off my head. That's the tension of the short form game, which is they know I'm playing the game. I'm not going to sneeze. But I'm acting like there's no way I can hold the sneeze back. And if laughter is a result of tension broken, I break the tension by finally sneezing. And then when we break tension, it's either in a way that they can expect, which is the sneeze, or in a way that they can't expect, which is a hat flies off my head. So they get the payoff of like, he did sneeze and what? And the hat flew off his head. And then I have to be prepared to do that same bit for 30 minutes to an hour because kids just want again. And I think that, I'm not sure if that's dopamine or it's one of the chemicals in our brain that's just like the payoff. That's like serotonin surge or dopamine surge or I don't know.
But you don't need to heighten the hat move, right?
No,
the kids are fine with just doing the same sneeze.
If you just say chew, they will get a laugh.
Yeah.
But they'll all. I mean, if I was smart, I would just pay it off with a sneeze. But I do the hat for the, because I'm an actor.
Yeah.
I want the extra payoff. If you just do the sneeze and don't do the hat trick, then they won't want you to do it long because now they've seen it all.
Right.
But once you do the hat trick, it's kind of impossible to make your hat fly up of your head in the same way each time.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
So it flies off different. And usually after about 10 repetitions of that, you can put a hat on the kid and the kid will do the trick back to you.
Yeah, it's fine.
And then I leave, and then the parents have to deal with a child that wants to do the sneezing hat trick for the next 2 years of their life.
Yeah.
Which is my joy.
Speaking a little bit about like patterns, as you mentioned, and heightenings and these concepts, you talked also about the difference between, since I've also been to the States, I've talked about Kieth Johstone there.
Yep.
Very like a name that isn't that familiar to the people I talk to anyway. And likewise here in Sweden anyway, their close isn't that kind of a big name in quotation.
Sure.
So you talked about the differences between Kieth Johnston, like Johnstonian improv maybe, and their close.
Sure.
And how they affected different branches maybe.
Sure. Well, yeah, there's places in the States, it's kind of all around the coasts, and then at Hideout Theater in Austin, Texas, and then so like West Coast, Austin, Texas, and then it swings back up the East Coast in New England. There's some Johnstone narrative educated folks there. And I mean, Dell died in 1999, and honestly, I'm one of the co-founders of Annoyance Theater, and so I think Mick Napier's name is as important as either one of them. Because, I mean, without Mick Napier, there's no Annoyance Theater, and there were certainly a lot of us that added to what the Annoyance is. But the idea of you have to take care of yourself, I think, is just as unique as trust your obvious, or don't say the obvious thing, do the interesting thing. We treat each other and our audiences like artists and poets and geniuses. That's Adele. And ultimately, in improvisation, each improviser is their own entity. So I don't think there's any one way to look at improvisation, but I think it's healthiest to look at improvisation and people like Johnstone, people like Del Close, Mick Napier, or even the guys that invented match improv or match impro in Quebec, or even Augusto Boal in
Colombia,
in Brazil. And even so right now, a lot of people, because the world is in such horrible shape, everybody wants to do comedy. So Game of the Scene, which is UCB, it's really just derivative of Dell. But it also has an overlap with Kieth Johnstone, where Game of the Scene is an improvised writing tool that happens on our feet that promises, if we can master this process called Game of the Scene, we should be able to improvise in a way that has us do a scene that we can record and transcribe. And when you transcribe that scene, it should look like a perfect piece of improv, sketch comedy. And I know, and you said you talked to Will Hines, and for my money, I think he is, if I had to study Game of the Scene, I would study with Will. I think he's both articulate. I think he's flexible. And I think he knows the formula very well. And I think he's able to respond to different personality types and able to take into account different learning styles when he's teaching them. He also has, I think, a generosity of spirit where he can be, still in wonder and awe and in support of younger players. I get his newsletter. And so I respect that about him. But Game of the Scene is an engineering proposition. And the part of Game of the Scene that, that I like Will is he puts the emphasis on, what's the platform, what's the base, and the Game of the Scene is the first interesting thing, the first odd thing, the first weird thing that happens. And then if this is true, what else is true? Well, while you're playing the absurdity of the Game of the Scene, can you, quote unquote, play it honest? Can you play it real? And that's the tricky part. You can know the idea, but I think it's in that piece that improvisers will find their match or not their match on a person to teach them or coach them in Game of the Scene. Because that's the humanity, that's the jazz part of it.
Yeah, so playing the absurdity with truth, is that a jazz part?
Yes. So what is truth? What is, and for me, it means emotional truth. I think Will says, can you play the absurd straight? Can you play it straight? Can you play it honest? Can you play it, it doesn't mean the same emotion, but there's an emotional piece. When we're playing the Game of the Scene, my interpretation of that is, can we play it in a way that's not like you're a chess master working a puzzle, but can we be a character that's more fully formed that just so happens to be playing the Game of the Scene as a writing tool while maintaining the jazz and the interpersonal connection with the other person in the scene?
Yeah.
And so I even think, I think Del and Kieth and Augusta Boal were, they're valuable parts of our history, but I think all we can do is continue to evolve and teach what we teach. And I'm glad that, Mick still teaches, Game of the Scene is one way to play. Take care of yourself in the scene is another way to play. Narrative, what we're doing here, everything is a story. Let's play the story. That's one way to play.
Yeah.
Harold is, we're going to deconstruct a single suggestion. We're going to separate out the points or the peats. We're going to separate out the pieces of this suggestion that we have. We're going to deconstruct it into disparate points. We're going to blow it out and find all the dynamically different pieces of inspiration that this suggestion can give us. And then we're going to explore it theatrically, really following patterns. And some of it is verbal patterns and words, which I believe led to Game of the Scene. And then some of it is the physicality. How are we behaving as an actor? And then some of it is the emotional piece, which I think tends to get lost as we're working puzzles. So in a way, Harold becomes a jazz proposition where you discover the engineering. Narrative is an engineering process where you hope to discover the jazz. Sometimes it's enough to work the puzzle, but it's great if you're working the puzzle playing characters that people care about. As opposed to just presentational characters that we're saying, this is a prince, this is a princess, this is a cowboy, this is a pirate. How do they all come together? Well, whose story is it? What's the promise? What do they want? What do they have to endure? The easiest thing to lay over narrative is hero or heroine's journey, because it's not that complex.
Yeah.
And then just depending on who you're talking to, some people are really adept at, being convinced there's only 7 stories or there's only 9 stories or there's only 12 stories. I'm pretty sure there's books. I think those are the numbers that say there's only 9 stories. There's only 7 stories, only 12 stories. If that's what works for you and you like to play within that paradigm, totally cool. Everybody gets to improvise however they want to improvise. if I had my way in people's first 10 years of improvising, they would probably come to improvisation the way most people do, which is like, oh, this seems fun, as a recreational proposition. And then when they get to the 10-year part, they would examine to what degree do we aspire to something more in terms of quality for our audience, or in terms of the skill level with which we all play. Or if we're just going to do recreational improv, can we just commit to we want to have fun? And can we ask ourselves honestly, if we're having fun, does that also mean the audience is having fun? Or are we self-consumed and up our own ass? And we know that people are going to be in this bar anyway, watching improv. My hope is that that improvisation, I don't believe improvisation is an art form. I believe improvisation is an art medium, like paint. I've said this before, but I've used improvisation with other people to create art, but not once have we begun the night saying, let's make some art tonight. So one of my goals in teaching is to support, to train, to play with people who want to get back to one idea that Del put forth which is, can we play in a way that has us create a piece of theater that is as entertaining as anything scripted that people could pay money to see?
Is that the professional, like you mentioned, the recreational, hobby and professional?
Yeah. So in my book, which will hopefully be done and out in 2026, my book is called Maybe It's Your Fault, an improv book. I ask, why am I doing improv? And then amid a group, why are we doing improv? I've noticed that after 2 years of playing together, a lot of the conflict within an improv group comes from people wanting to improvise for different reasons. And so to improvise recreationally is just simply to improvise to have fun. That is contrasted against to improvise professionally is let's improvise in a way where we're playing to the top of our skill level, not the top of our intelligence, but the top of our skill level. And let's aspire to sharpen our play with each show that we do, without getting precious about it. And that just means we're going to show up, we're going to show up dressed like we care. A pet peeve of mine is, I don't think if you have a professional attitude about improvisation, I would not show up in shorts to improvise. Doesn't mean you can't, but that's for a group to decide. And then the other piece within that is some people just want to improvise in one way and they're not interested in any other ways of improvising. And so the third way is a hobbyist. And so a hobbyist would include genre improv, so Shakespeare or Bammet or Jane Austen, musical improv. There's plenty of improvisers, especially musical improvisers. I just want to do musical improv. I don't want to do any of the other stuff. And so that's when we're a hobbyist, the focus is let's get this right. If we're going to do improvised Star Trek, let's wear Star Trek uniforms. Let's dress the stage like a Star Trek stage. Let's deliver Star Trek archetypes. Same with Jane Austen, same with Shakespeare, whatever. And now you can be a hobbyist, but also play recreationally. So yeah, we're going to kind of do a Star Trek thing and maybe it's more short form and we're just going to have fun, but we're going to do enough that you can see that we've paid attention to what this genre is. We've paid attention to what it is that we're promising you, and you're going to see some of that. Or you can be a hobbyist with a professional take on that, which is we're going to do Jane Austen. We're going to dress like people from Jane Austen. We're going to speak like people from Jane Austen stories. And we're going to dress the stage and we're going to, we're going to make this an event. And, part of professional is, are we justified in charging the ticket price that we're charging? And so that's the tricky part, because there's a lot of theater owners, I think, that are faced with how do I, as a theater owner, facilitate both recreational nights, recreational shows, people just having fun, community center energy, everybody's welcome, with professional improvisation, Friday, Saturday night shows. This is the top of what we've got. We want to impress people. We want to entertain people. We want to commune with them in whatever the ethos of our theater is. But we're charging more, and we're charging more because the quality of our work demands that we charge more. Not we're charging more because we need to stay open. And can we also, discover the nerds in our group that want to do, improvise Lord of the Rings or improvise D&D or improvise musical night? And can we then help them go all in to really do a presentation that captures the most that thing that it can be? And that could be, if we're doing musical improv, we're going to get a top of the line piano player, top of the line musician, and we're going to pay that person. So yeah, does that kind of explain the different focuses?
Yeah, it does. Cool. You were also saying sometime during the workshop that you are always thinking, either you are doing it unconscious or conscious. Do you remember I don't remember the circumstances or really, but I just wrote it down because I thought it was interesting.
I mean, even if you're in a meditative state, the absence of thinking is a state of thinking. Even if in music, a rest where there's no music is a part of music.
Okay.
And so I probably said that relative to somebody saying, can we enter the stage with an idea or can we enter neutrally? And so I don't believe there's a such thing as neutral, because you have a body that will be interpreted by an audience just by the way it walks into the scene. So there's a dear friend is David Rosowski. And so he's also one of the co-founders of Annoyance. He was around at the beginning. And he and I teach largely the same thing, but just in completely different ways. But he argues that the first 30 seconds of a scene, you're just getting rid of the bullshit until the real scene starts. He calls that the MacGuffin. And shit, I forget what that's a reference to. And my point of view is, like, as soon as you walk on the scene, why aren't we starting right now? So, either one is fine.
Of how you want to go into the scene. Either it's like also, it has already started mindset.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
which you explain.
Or we all are here. We're all aware that we're in a room where some people are making shit up, and we're going to grant 20 or 30 seconds of bullshit before we shift gears and we're in this scene and we're doing it. And so, okay, fine.
Sure.
And I also know that there's certain people I play with, after we get the suggestion, we'll clear the stage. And the moment our impulse takes us into the beginning, we're there. And there's, well, to be fair, there's a couple of people that will fuck around for a few seconds, but I won't. And it still works. It still usually works. So I've done improv for 48 years. So the other thing is, it's fine to have an opinion about everything in improv. The advice is, though, to have opinions that have flexibility built into them.
And probably always be ready to change as well.
I think so. My preference is I like to see people dressed in clothes that are a choice that they make because they're improvising tonight. There was a time in New York, like at UCB, where the general improvisational uniform were the clothes that somebody slept in last night. Like they just roll out of bed and then like into the show and let's do game of the scene. And okay. At that time, I think that also works in New York City, but I really haven't been in the last couple of years. I can't say that I've been in any of the OG game of the scene houses. So I don't know. I mean, improv in general, the United States has taken a hit. Theaters have taken a hit.
Yeah.
And so now we're kind of back to storefront models and we're back to, we're starting a new generation of improvisers. So, and I had cancer, so I was out of, I had 3 different cancers. I was out of commission for a year and a half or 2. I was out of commission for COVID. I was back for a little bit. I had 3 cancers. Now I'm kind of getting back to even touring in the States. So I know my preference, if I'm going to do a longer tour, my preference is to get out of the country. And then in the States, I'm just going back to different theaters for like a Thursday to Sunday type thing. And not as many festivals. But yeah, what am I saying? I can't really speak to what the state of improvisation in theaters are in the United States right now, other than to say, it seems like everybody's building back up. And I can certainly play game of the scene, and I play game of the scene my way. But even the founders of game of the scene will say, they will say, we know that this is just one way to improvise. It's the way that they like to improvise. So that's how they improvise. I'm a professional improviser. So for me, that means I want to be able to improvise in any way, in any language, with any group of people, and to be of service. And so maybe before I got distracted with my ADD, the point I originally wanted to make was we can all improvise in whatever way we want, as long as we're like open and we're just of service to the people there.
Right. It's important. Why are we doing improv? What kind of improv do we want to do? We're playing with the same tools. Are we playing we are playing sport, but are we playing football or ice hockey? Yeah, it's different, right?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that was interesting about Patty and I is I don't think we knew this about each other until after we played together. Like, oh, our brains we're from 2 different schools, but our brains kind of really naturally vibe. We both played high school basketball. And basketball, we both believe that basketball is the greatest metaphor for improvisation. Contrary to our dear friend Fenia Ortali in Spain, who says it's soccer, football. But I think for sure, Patty and I, we have some common ground on how we look at what's in front of us because of basketball. And to me, it plays just as big a role as any improv school that we're from. Mm. And when we played together, we wouldn't talk about what we would do. It's like, we're both just like, nope. I wanted like some structure. Should we think about something? Patty, nope. I'm like, great, let's not. And 30 minutes before the show, we came up with an idea because that's what seemed to light us both up that night. We had no plan other than to get somebody give us their iTunes and pick a song. And the title of the song would be the title of our play. And then the song itself the lights would go dark. The song itself would play. The lights would come up as the play began. Mm. And the very first scene we ever did together, we're in Würzburg in Germany. The lights come up and it turns out we're 2 spies circling around each other on stage. And it was so amusing to me that that's how we ended up starting. And of course the Germans were like all in. And I was even worried, like, oh, is this just too inside improv or no. Like we're just spies. And then out of each of our mouths, we were almost embodying entities that, from which we were the spies, checking each other out. And it was, I still I even have a little tear in my eye just thinking about it, because what a great start to the experiment. Can we play together? Pretty freaking cool. And you're going to talk to Patty too.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That'll be great.
I will see if she gets touched when she talks about it.
Yeah.
I think it's mutual.
I think so. No, I love everybody I play with. If I'm on stage with you, I love you. And that's like, to me, this is the highest form of existence, because I'm a nerd. And so even if there's people I don't care for, part of being a professional improviser is like, you're on stage. And so, I will care for you. And, that took me until my 50s to be able to do, because once you're 50, you're too tired to hold on to anger. Mm-hmm. Or I was too tired to hold on to anger. And also, if my job is to be of service when I'm on stage, that doesn't mean I have to carry that off stage with me. So yeah, improv can provide a lot of conflict and a lot of fears and a lot of anxieties. But when you find somebody, like when Patty and I found each other, she'll tell the story of, well, we actually met in Texas, but I mean, we literally met and we sat on a floor at an opening party in Texas, and we each had like 6 beers together, and we just laughed and talked, and we're happy we finally met. And so I don't think we talked about improv at all.
Did your jazz musicians vibe well, play together?
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Is it anything more, Joe, that you want to add? Like the book, you mentioned the book, hopefully 2026?
Hopefully 2026 next year.
What was the name, the title?
The book is called Maybe It's Your Fault, an improv book. And I'm hoping, my friend Daniel Arancia from Colombia, I think, is going to do the artwork on it. I have my book doula is Kat Coppett from Mopco Theater, who's also a wonderful improviser. She's an AIN person as well. And
Applied improvisation
person as well, which I'm not. I have lots of friends that do that, but she's really, really smart. And we use Zoom there's an app called Fathom, which basically just is it transcribes, it records the thing and then gives you a transcript. So Kat keeps me focused on what I'm supposed to be focused on and doesn't let my brain fire off, like has happened a couple times in this chat. And so for sure, when I finally get this thing out, she will have been a big facilitator of that, and I hope you get to talk to her someday, because she's pretty great.
I've read her book, Kat Coppett's book.
Oh, great! Yeah,
Training to Imagine or something.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's I watched her. She also has a TED talk or TEDx talk. I know. I've seen her anyway on YouTube.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it would make. Yeah. I didn't know that she has a TED talk, but it doesn't surprise me. I mean, she's brilliant. She's brilliant and awesome. We keep threatening to play together, but I think I have to finish my book first to earn the right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I think that's it. I really appreciate you talking.
Likewise.
Cool, man.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, man. Let's shake on it. Good job. Hi, Sweden.